So we are going to be creating nature monoprints with real plants and flowers. So today was a very blustery and cold day, but I always like to take the time on Earth Day to go outside and take a walk in nature. The weather did kind of throw a wrench in that today, and I collected some plants and flowers to use to create art. Now, artists use nature in art all the time, whether it's natural pigments. I know a lot of artists use turmeric dyes and things of that nature. There are also artists who use real plants through forms of printmaking. There's also flower pressing and different kind of art forms that you can incorporate plants in that way. So I've got a few things here that you will need to start doing monoprinting. I've got some paper. I went ahead and kind of ripped a deckled edge on my watercolor paper I have here to give it a natural finish. You can use any kind of paper. The thicker and more heavy duty your paper is, the better it's going to turn out. I've got some Crayola watercolors here. This is one of their large sets. Lots of different plants and flowers. Paintbrushes. I have a roller. That makes it a little easier to print some of the plants. And then I have a water cup. So I'm just going to get started and set up my work area. So I've got some paper towels here. I also like to have my blotting paper where I kind of put down the individual plants and leaves. And you can really coat them with paint, let that paper soak up all the extra, and then stamp the finished leaf after it's been painted onto your design paper over here. So for my paintbrushes, I like to use paintbrushes that are a little softer. They're not like really rigid. The brushes aren't really hard, because those kinds of brushes are going to have a really hard time soaking up all of the paint and getting it down onto the plant without damaging it. So I've got a few different kinds of plants, and I want to talk a little bit about and show you an example of what plants are good and make really good prints, and what ones are better for something like flower pressing or flower preservation or a different form of art. So I've got this stem here, which you might think would be really good to make a stem shape, but the issue with this one is it's got a lot of texture and it's not really going to sit flat. So when we're doing a print, what we're going to do is we're going to coat this plant. I'll just pick a green color. Let me place it down. We're going to coat it. But you notice it's not really laying flat, so it's not going to really behave well when I go to stamp it down on my little example piece over here. So I did get a good outline, but it didn't really get all of the things I liked about it. It didn't get the little leaves. It didn't get all the texture that's going on. So I might put that aside and go for something that's more like this, that's going to be kind of squishy and bendy and flexible, that'll behave really well if I go to print it. So I'm just going to pick a nice yellow color for this. I'm just going to paint over it, really saturate all these little flowers. And then I'm going to take this and kind of stamp it down and press it with my hand. So then here you can see I got more of the texture I was looking for. On second thought, that yellow paint is kind of hard to see, but there's a really nice texture. I'm getting all of the leaves and all of the different flowers and patterns and things like that. So let's put that one aside, and I'm going to grab the diamond shaped paper, and we can do a little bit of a really interesting composition with our watercolor prints. So I'm going to show you kind of a small example that I made. So this is like a little card. I stamped this with a piece of a hydrangea flower and some other leaves and things like that at the bottom, and that came out really nicely. And then this was, I believe, a tulip leaf that I just stamped over and over again to get an interesting texture and all kinds of different colors. So you can do a lot. You could do a very simple pattern, or you could do something that's more complicated. So for my next print, I think I'm going to wash off my big brush here that soaks up a lot of paint. And I'll go purple. I like purple. I also like blue too, so I'll just go in with like a purple blue color. And what I'm going to do is lay this flower down, and I'm just going to saturate those flowers with the watercolor paint, so I get like a really nice, pretty, vivid print from them. I'm just going to keep going. Maybe towards the top, the bottom is really, really soaked in that dark color. So maybe towards the top I can switch to a lighter color and get kind of an ombre effect going on. It does come in handy to have like a little piece of paper that you can paint on top of, so you don't end up soaking your desk or the area that you're working. Although watercolor paint's pretty easy to clean up. So you see I've got this soaked with paint, so I'm just going to take it, going to place it down on my nice diamond shaped paper with the deckled edges. And something that really helps me when I'm working with, you know, a flower that has lots of texture is I'm just going to roll down on top of it with this little roller here. If you don't have this, you could even try using a book or just press with your hands like I did before, but this helps get a really interesting texture going on. So I got a nice, beautiful texture of all of the different flowers there. We're going to give that a second to dry, and I'll just try a few more. And I like, one of my favorite things to print with is just a leaf like this. I'll do a little bit of a smaller one. So I have this pretty leaf here. I'm just going to set this down on my blotting paper, and I'll pick a nice lime green color. And we're just going to do a little bit of a repeating pattern with this one leaf. Maybe we can switch up the color as we go too. That will be really interesting to look at. So here I go, and I'm just going to press it down, rub over it really gently with my thumb, and there's my leaf shape. Now, I used the smooth side that's a little waxy, but we can see what happens if I use the other side too. That has a little bit more texture and might give us a more interesting print. So I'm just going to take my plant and I'll press it down. So you can see I got some of that more interesting texture going on that really shows off the shape of the leaf and all the different things that are going on there. I have a little sprout from my sage plant from my herb garden, so we're going to see how that one prints. I'm actually really curious about this. It has a nice texture, but I've never tried printing it before. So let's go in with, let's do a red color. That'll be really interesting. Press it down pretty gently because this is a really tiny little leaf. And it makes a, you can see all of the different little bits of texture on the flower really clearly. So we're just going to stamp it the same way you would a regular stamp. We'll get a little bit more paint on here. So you can experiment with it, try different things. There's lots of different plants you can use. See which plants work the best. I'll try another few just while we wait for my big flower to dry. Now this is, I think, a rose leaf, so it has like some nice texture on it, but it's pretty big. So let's try a little guy. We can just lay it down. I like to use the back side that has a little bit more of a texture. Sometimes the part of a plant or a leaf that faces up is really waxy because the plant wants the rain and water to kind of bounce down and go to its roots. So the back side has sometimes a more interesting texture that's better for printing. So you can see you can get the shape of the leaves, and each one kind of makes its own impression and is very, very unique. So we can kind of go back to our big hydrangea flower really quick while we're waiting for it to kind of dry and settle down. We can do a few more little stamps. It's nice to do some practice prints because the first time you use it or the first time you put paint on it, you might not soak all the way through, or you might soak a little too much in. So let me just blot it out over here. And I think sometimes the blotting paper comes out really interesting and can be used in a lot of different ways too. So let me press that down. And you can really enhance what's going on in your prints by going back in and doing some painting. You can add the stems. The stems might not always print so nicely like we talked about earlier. They have a lot of texture, but sometimes that doesn't come through in a print. And then if I wanted to, I could go in with a wet paintbrush and I can do something where I add a little bit of a wash to the edges of my artwork. Where I kind of blend what's going on into the background just a little bit. And that is plant-inspired monoprinting. So I hope you have a great night. Thank you for joining in today, and make sure to enjoy Earth Day.